Good evening, it's Brian of Brian's Budget Bonsai, and today we're going to be working on unwiring the weeping willow and maybe rewiring some of the new growth. That's kind of a wait and see situation. Now you might notice a little bit of subtle movement in the branches. I do, and you might even hear it in the background. I have the fan going. I decided to try to mow the front yard this evening before the sun went down when it was relatively cool. We've had some rain, which means the grass started to grow, and the HOA might start complaining if I didn't mow it. So at least the front yard looks like somebody lives here now. But I'm too hot and sweaty to not have a fan blowing on my head right now. So, well, please forgive the fan noises in the background. Okay, so today I'm going to try to unwire this. Now, I'm going to sometimes have to use the wire cutters. Sometimes I have to use the wire pliers, but the most part, this is all going to be done with my fingers. So, usually, since the thinner wire goes on last, it comes off first. So you'll look for places where you have thin wire that is on top of thick wire. Yeah, it's probably just starting to make a little bit of wire marks. I like to reuse my wire whenever I can. Some people will just go in there with their wire cutters and cut everything off in little pieces. Now, if you're using copper wire, oh, see here, I must have put on this thicker wire after the thinner wire, which usually isn't the case, but I can't get this off till I've done a little work here. Alright, I'm going to move you all in a little closer here for action shots. So we're going to try to pull back a little bit of this thicker wire. Now we get here. I think I was saying something along the lines of copper wire. This is aluminum wire, and it's fairly easy to work with, both putting on and off. Copper wire, once you put it on, it hardens and it's almost impossible to take off without damaging your branches. So that stuff you need to cut off. It's what they call work hardened. I've used it before, and you can use thinner wire to get the same bend as you would have to with thicker wire and aluminum, but the trade-off is it's hard to remove without either cutting it all away and having to throw it all away. Let's face it, copper doesn't grow on trees, even though we put it on trees. It is a finite resource. And as the world becomes more and more electrified, we're going to need copper. Sometimes these edges, the end tips are kind of sharp, so it's a good idea to get them started a little bit with the pliers so you don't brutalize your fingertips too much. Okay, I think that's as far as I can go with that one. Let me remove this one. This one's definitely starting to bite in a little bit right there. You can see that starting to bite in. So this is definitely the time to start taking this off before the leaf scars get too bad. It's kind of a balancing act. You want somewhat of the branch to grow underneath the wire. And the wire has to be tight enough to hold the branch in place. But if you leave it on for too long, you get the wire scars. Now that's a smaller branch, you might grow those out. You definitely want to try to avoid the wire scars on the larger branches. And I'll show you one of those in a little bit where it takes a long time for them to grow out. And they eventually they can grow out in most species. And even in some species like the pines and the junipers, the wire scars can eventually even lead to developing some interesting character to the trunks and branches. But when you're talking about deciduous trees, that's a little sharp one. When you're talking about deciduous trees, it's not really attractive to have all these spiral scars all over your branches. So you got to keep an eye on them and pull them off in the first signs of trouble. Here's where we get the top half and the bottom half of that wire. Coming around there, feed this through. Now when I wired this, I defoliated the tree to make it easier for me to put the wire in. But I don't want to defoliate the tree when I'm unwiring it right now, because I'm very happy with the growth that I've got and I want to encourage it. So I'm just going to have to be careful not to knock too many branches off. Yeah, it's just in time with that wire. I'll take that off in a little bit and I'll show you in a sec what I'm talking about. Okay. You can see up in this junction right here, just starting to get some wire marks. That should grow out pretty easily. May take a year or two, but that won't be noticeable in a little bit. All right, let's swing around and unwire this branch. All right, we'll take this one off first. Use the pliers to get it started. Once you got it started, you got a little leverage. You can grab the middle of the wire. Also, it's helpful, you see me kind of grabbing a little further up from where I'm wiring to stabilize the branch. Like right here. Now this wire went to 2-branch principle from this branch to this branch, but now that I've loosened this up, if I crank on that wire too much, I might break that other one. So now I'm going to come back to this end and unwire it from this end. Didn't need to use the pliers on that one because it had already stuck out a little bit. I'm going to grab that branch just above where that wire was unwinding. Now, here's the thing. This thing sprung up. So it originally was more down like this. Now it's sprung up. So that's part of the balancing act with your wiring. So you got to take it off before it starts to scar, but you want to leave it on long enough for the branch to, as they say, what's called ligify or ligify. I think it's ligify. I said it right the first time. which means all those wood fibers now have adapted to that new position. Take it off too soon, it springs back. Now, these willows tend to be on the springy side. So I expect when I take these wires off to have some spring back. But that's okay, because they may get wired later and push them back down a little bit further. Or again, I might go in next time I wire it, not even wire these branches again, but move on to these smaller branches and start wiring them down. Some of these have gotten something nibbling on them, and I don't know what, but every year I always seem to have something that nibbles on the ends of these. And some little bugger, but I've never caught the culprit. So I spray these up with some neem oil and make sure it gets plenty of water and fertilizer, and they usually spring back even when they look like they've been pretty devastated. As long as you can keep a willow wet, you got a good chance of letting it live. They do have random dieback on their branches, and they don't really like wiring that much. See, that a lot of these branches that were wired are kind of on the weak side. There's hardly any growth on some of these. I'm hoping, one of the reasons why I want to take the wire off was I wanted to encourage some of more growth on this side of the tree. Most of the growth was on this side of the tree, and I think that was positioning in some part. I think that was exasperated by the wiring. Oh, here's a nice little trick here. I had actually taken and made a little wire hook like this and pulled this branch, helped pull this branch down by looping it around the branch and then hooking it around one of the lower branches. And that is actually not a bad way of encouraging the weeping branches or the hanging branches, rather than risking the wire scars. You can just, hook a little wire there and pull it down and loop it around the trunk or loop it around a different a lower branch, and tends to make it look very busy, but and that method doesn't work as well in terms of like causing the little micro trauma to like the cambium layer that contributes to these branches setting in these positions, but it also doesn't scar the branches nearly as much, especially if you do some protection of the trunk and branches where the wire is anchoring, so that you can use tubing or you can use surgical tubing. You can use tubing from aquariums, like for the oxygen pumps. They all work. You just wrap the wire in a little bit of the plastic tubing, and it'll keep it from marring the tree. See how that one sprung up? What I could do, if I wanted it to come down more, and I didn't want to keep the wire on anymore, straighten out this wire again, and make a little bit of a loop around there, and just kind of loop it like that. Now that branch is being held down in a weakened position. You don't have as much like side to side control over this, and you can't put like twists and curves in your branches that way. You can just pretty much pull them in one direction, but that's not necessarily bad. It's just a limitation of that process. Getting distracted. Let me keep wiring. Got to finish taking this wire off here. This one looks like it'll bite my fingers, so we've got to be a little bit. There we go. A little more careful getting that off. Oh yeah, that's a thicker wire, and yeah, you'll see some wire scars in there. Not too bad. A lot of wire dents. Not as bad as when it's like actually the tree starts to grow around the wire. That's not too bad of a thing. I've even seen where like Peter Chan will leave wire on like a pine purposefully and permanently, and just let the tree grow over the wire, and it thickens the trunk. It gives kind of a gnarly effect to it. There we go. And I can attest, I had that happen to just one branch, unfortunately, on a dwarf Alberta spruce that I was had wired up, and unfortunately it was near the apex, the last place you want a thick gnarly branch to suddenly poke up. All right, let's start on this branch now. Okay, that's about as far as I can go on that one. Now, because it's at the junction, if I kind of hold this branch still to open up, move that one, otherwise I could have broke this branch. Get this started. Yeah, I have to grab that way up there. Hard to get the leverage on it. There we go. Alright, now I've got probably enough leverage. I have to kind of somewhat stabilize the other end of the wire, because the branch will break before the wire will bend sometimes, and you got to be really careful about that. Little wire there. That one was just anchored to other wire. It wasn't even a two-branch thing. Sometimes you can anchor the back of a wire to a thicker wire. You can keep it from moving. And basically you can kind of cheat that two-branch principle. If that wire is already anchoring a branch, technically, yeah, you've got your two branches there, but the wire is an extension of that branch. It's preferable to wire one branch to another when you can. There's a lot of bonsai practitioners most bonsai practitioners use wires. Some bonsai practitioners don't use any wire at all. Those of you who are in the know that Nigel Saunders of the Bonsai Zone and Tom Nowak of the Go and Clip Bonsai for Seniors are very much anti-wire. And you can see when I'm getting all these wire scars what some of their point might be. But I also know that very hard to get a weeping willow in miniature form to weep, because what causes a grown weeping willow to weep is the weight of its own branches. They have these long branches that grow out, and eventually the weight of them, of their own branches, pulls them down into a weeping position. But when they're young and they're short like this, sprawling up they go. So to recreate the look of a weeping willow is sometimes difficult. Now, I probably shouldn't have bent this one in this direction, because that really kind of crosses the midline of the tree. So this branch may not even last too long. There may be a certain point in the future. Yeah, it's all scarred up too. This branch might just be not worth it. And it does have a couple younger branches, fresh branches, unscarred branches. One here, that I could just cut this off. Got a little bit of a scar there, but might heal up. But I might be able to replace this scarred up branch here with some younger ones, and see if I can avoid scarring those ones up. Now, still pulling the wire away here. As you start getting down into the thicker branches and the last of the wire, yeah, it becomes a little tougher. All right, we are down to our last branch. Not too bad. Now I want to show you something here. On this branch here, you can see last year's wire scars. This is the wire scar from last year. And this is the wire scars from this year. Here you can barely see on the trunk the wire marks from 2 years ago. So they do eventually get kind of incorporated into the texture of the bark, but not always, and it takes a while. I'm going to cut off a little bit of the dead growth. Again, sometimes the weeping willows respond to wiring by just dying their branches off. usually you can see where they go from being green to brown. I wanted to have some of these branches go down a little bit more. I could try, give them a little hook here and kind of pulling them down. Wrapping around there. A little bit more. And that could create a little bit of a weeping effect. If I wire that down there like that, causes it to come down. We know it's going to spring back when I let go. If I wired a few more of those down in that way, I could get, bring in a lot of these branches down in that fashion. But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this tree a bit of a break. I don't think I'm going to do any more wiring to this. I'm not going to do any more pruning. I'm going to just let it kind of grow for a while. It does have some strong upward growth. I want this tree to regain some of its strength, some of its vigor. Let this kind of grow up. I can always bring this branch back down again at a certain point. Have this be another contributing to the weeping look. Where I want to put this, I don't know. But I'll like to see how much of this springs up, how much of this stays down, how much of this dies back, how much of this puts out new growth. And then I can deal with that after maybe like another month or so. We have a long growing season here, so I think leave well enough alone on that one. I wanted to show you a trick real quick before I go about how to turn bonsai wire that looks like this into bonsai wire that looks like this. And there's a couple ways you can do it. My favorite way is you get 2 pairs of pliers and you grab each end of them real firmly with the wire, with the pliers. Straighten it out a little bit. And here's where having a good grip on these things comes in handy. Pull apart, snap, 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 like that. Now, you drop it on the floor. That's important. Don't forget it. Back. And I just like to store them in nice little loops. They're easier to keep track of. Thicker the wire, the more aggressive you're going to have to be. Here we got this one here. I'm going to take a little bit more to straighten out this one. But let's see. Snap, snap, snap. Boom, boom, boom. Ooh. Let go of it on one end. But essentially, a couple quick pulls of the pliers, and you've got it off there. Now it leaves kind of like a little rough edges, but you know what gets rid of that? Take the little wire snippers. You don't like those little rough edges. Snip and snip. Now you got clean edges on that. Brian, what about some of that really thick wire? Well, that can be done too. It's going to take a little more oomph. All right, so and pull and pull and pull and pull. Not too bad. Better than that There we go. And just keep pulling. There we go. So now it's a little straighter. Now, it does take a fair amount of upper body strength and to do that, but this is a trick that Peter Chan showed us once, and I'll just pause. Once you've got a wire relatively straight and you can't get the rest out, what he'll tell you is he'll go against the table. He'll start rubbing it back and forth against the table. Try to get it to straighten out. And you just keep going and going and going. And eventually it straightens out. So that's a good way to kind of get all those bendy twisties out of your wire with brute force. Alrighty. Yes, you got to see the mess that is my workbench. Sorry about that, folks. But in the meantime, stay cool, happy bonsaiing,